Hello everyone. Good morning to folks on the West Coast and good afternoon to folks in the Midwest, the Central Time, the Mountain Time and the East Coast. We have a large number of people today joining into our webinar. I'll introduce myself. My name is Amit. I'm going to be sort of coordinating this event today. The webinar is on best practices in responsive web design. We are going to be talking about our experiences and stuff that my colleague Prachi and Vibhuti have experienced over the past many years in terms of Harbinger's experience in developing multiple web applications and what they have learned in terms of how applications look on those. So without further ado, let me kind of give you a small brief on Harbinger Systems. Harbinger Systems is a company which is into software development, mostly specialized for companies which work in mobile technologies, cloud, big data, and multiple web applications for the past 23 years. We have multiple offices in India and the US, and it is our experience over these many years that we thought there are areas which are becoming critical now for the performance that people want from their browsers for various applications. And I thought I will invite Prachi and Vibhuti into this webinar since they are the most knowledgeable in our organization. Prachi basically is into proposal engineering. She knows a lot of new technologies and new functions as well as how these technologies applies to business applications. Vibhuti is a design person. She knows exactly what goes on into a website or a web application and what it should be doing, how it should be performing. So I'm going to hand this over to Prachi and Vibhuti and they can start with their agenda. Thank you very much folks, and I hope you find this webinar interesting.
Thank you, Amit. A little note about this webinar. We have the title of the webinar as best practices, but when I was looking at the people who have signed up for the webinar, it's kind of a mixed crowd. So what we are going to do here is we will have a couple of slides about the introduction of the responsive web design and some key components and all, and then we are going to go into the best practices, which will be followed by some limitations and all that. So this is today's agenda, and we will start the webinar now. While thinking about doing this webinar, the first task of the day was to get an idea of why we need the responsive web design. We need this design because we are surrounded by devices. You think about it, this is a graph by ComScore, which is there right now on the screen. There is always a device, be it mobile, be it PCs, be it tablets, which is there with us any time of the day. Right now in this graph, there are no smart TVs, there are no game boxes, Xboxes, PS3s and all. But with that, you can imagine we are always surrounded by devices. So this is what and why we need these devices is because we need the applications which are there on the devices. This is the internet age and we are going to be connected always to the net. Here are some more statistics to kind of give support to my claim. Google sees 1.5 million Android devices activated per day. 119 million US TVs will be connected to the internet by 2015. So what I was saying is, since we need the internet for all these things, we need it for shopping, we need it for education, we need it for entertainment. Any time of the day we need the net, we need the transactions, we need the information on the net. And all these devices which are out there are making our life easy by letting these applications at our fingertips any time of the day. Okay, good, all very good. But then the challenge is we need the applications to look good on each and every device which is out there. Let me give you an example. We know that the iOS people, the Apple people get out devices every year. My colleague here is telling me that there is some echo which is there and which is troubling some people. Let me see if something can be done about it. Okay, if there is one person who is telling me about the echo, if a lot of people are hearing echo, can you please type it in your chat box? Okay, looks like we are good, we don't have that problem. and I'm going to resume the webinar. Okay, so I was at a place where I was talking about the iOS. Like I said, the iOS guys take out the device at new devices at a set frequency. They have one phone, one tablet every year. They are very good with backup compatibility, backward compatibility also. So when the iPhone 5 was about to come, what we were thinking was applications built for iPhone 4 will work as is and will work very well on iPhone 5. iPhone 5 came out, the applications were working, but they had changed the aspect ratio. So the applications were not looking as good as they were supposed to look good on iPhone 5. They were looking very good on iPhone 4, but iPhone 5 with the changed aspect ratio changed everything. Now consider the multiple devices which are available for Android platform, for Windows Mobile, add to that the smart TVs and the game boxes like I said earlier, and we'll know that it is a Herculean task when I say that my application should look good on all the devices which are available now, and not only that, which are available in the future. Now this is not something which I'm saying that it is which is new. But if in order to find a solution to that, what I did was look at the nature. Now this is a fun slide. What I can see here is it's a chameleon. We all know that it is very good in doing the camouflaging. What it does is, what the nature has enabled it to do is it changes its colors so that it looks good. It appears as if it is built for the environment, the ecosystem, the habitat that it is in. Okay. What we need to do with our applications is such that we need to design the application such that whatever device you put those applications in, they appear as if those applications were designed for that device. So this is what I'm going to take from nature, and this is what is going to take me to the responsive web design. So what we need is a smart, adaptive, logical, and single source design. We'll come to the single source part in a minute, but this is my problem definition. Now I'm not saying something which is entirely new. People have been trying to solve this problem for a while now. I remember my early days where we used to use percentage width to support the applications, so make the applications look good on Netscape as well as Internet Explorer. These percentage widths, this design type was later on called as adaptive design. Then the age of mobile came and people started doing mobile first design. They used to design the website first for the mobile and then kind of try to scale it up to the desktop. There was a drawback in the mobile first also, possibly simplistic design, because the websites which were designed specifically for mobile took into account the real estate which was available at that time, and then it was kind of going the simplistic way. Now we have reached a stage where we are kind of combining all these approaches, and now we are calling it responsive web design. And looks like we have a winner here, because responsive web design is kind of the most popular, one of the most popular trends in 2013. So what is responsive web design? This is what Wikipedia talks about. Responsive web design is something that enables us to design the application such that they work well, easy reading and navigation without or with minimum resize, span, scrolling, basically interactions with the devices, and it looks good on a devices ranging from mobile to desktop to smart TVs and all that. So this is responsive web design. Now we are going to look at some samples, and then it will be time for us to talk about best practices. Let's walk through a few samples of responsive websites. So what you see on the screen right now is our own website, which shows how design changes as per the device and the resolution. So if you look at the highlighted area, the horizontal menu, which was designed for the desktop version of the website, went inside the drop-down when it came on the other mobile devices. Here is the design of one learning management system application, which again shows how we can reduce the metro tiles which are shown on the desktop version of the website design to single buttons which are shown under the phone UI. So what we need to consider here is that we need to decide what content stays visible at specific resolution. So that is the main decision that as designers we need to take while working on responsive websites. Here is another example of the famous Starbucks website, which shows again how horizontally laid navigation list is condensed and it hides behind the small menu button when it comes to the mobile version of the website. So after having a look at these samples, let me walk you through a few components of RWD. So we have placed the 4 main components of RWD here. The first one being fluid layout. So when we talk of fluid layout, which consists use of grids, it is important to understand that this comprises of building the layout of a website with a flexible grid capable of dynamically resizing to any width. So these grids are built using relative length. So it is important to note here that we do not use fixed dimensions like fixed units like pixels and inches while working on fluid layout. Moving ahead, we have the most important component of RWD, which are the media queries. Now, media queries allow designers to build multiple layouts using the same HTML document by selectively serving the style sheet based on few parameters like the screen resolution and orientation. So like shown in this example, we have the media query written and the max width shows to be 800 pixels. So that's how we detect the device, and by giving the width we are calling the CSS. Moving ahead, we talk about flexible images and media. So what are flexible images? Images that move and scale with respect to the different devices are called flexible images. So there are various approaches how designers and developers deal with flexible images, out of which I would be mentioning 2 here. One being that we use large vector images and which are resized using the CSS properties based on the device. So, but the thing that we should be keeping in mind here is that we should not be scaling other formats of images like JPEG. So we should be scaling only the vector images, the large vector images. Another approach that few people follow is like use of multiple versions of the images on the server and then dynamically serve the appropriately sized version depending on the device. In this case, the efforts are needed to create several sets of images depending upon the sizes. Moving ahead, we have REST as one of the components of RWD. It stands for Responsive Server-Side Design. We'll talk about REST in details further. Okay, so we move ahead to best practices now. Before I walk you through the best practices, I would like to tell you that we have been using few of these practices here at Harbinger, and in the course of time we realized that these things were really useful, and we thought of putting them under the umbrella of best practices. First practice that we'll be talking about is clean, logical, and optimized code. So when we say clean, logical, and optimized code, it actually comprises of CSS being neat and modular. The markup should be clean and semantic, and the classes names which are used to define blocks should be descriptive. Content first design with final content. A responsive web design is it's an exercise in decision making around content. So as I told you while walking you through the samples, it is really important to work on the content and make decisions as to what content should be displayed on what device. So it's important to think about the content when planning RWD. Use of frameworks. Now, why we need to use frameworks is because as developers, we really do not need to invent the wheel again and again. So we should be using the ready-made frameworks which are available. These frameworks are good solutions to common CSS problems and browser compatibility. They are clean and tidy written codes which help speeding the mockup process. So there are several frameworks which are available like Bootstrap, Foundation 3, Groundwork, Cube, etc. Considering appropriate breakpoints. Breakpoints are browser widths that have a media query declaration to change the layout once the browser is within the declared range. So there are various breakpoints that can be considered. Few standard breakpoints are like for mobile and tablets, and moving extra mile, we can have breakpoints for landscape and portrait mode of both these devices. So it is also advisable to create custom breakpoints using media queries while giving appropriate range and mode. Now let me add something about the custom breakpoints. Why we need these custom breakpoints? Usually the standard breakpoints are for the mobile dimensions, the tablet dimensions, that is 320 pixels, 480 pixels and all that. But there can be some devices, some cases where you are going to need something to look good at 355 pixels. Now adding a breakpoint at that particular width is not a good idea, but what we can do here is we can specify a range where you can say that for width, minimum width 380, 320 and maximum width whatever 360, which is going to take care of the breakpoint, the 355 width size for you. And this is what the custom breakpoints will help you do. This is just one example of doing that, but there can be various such examples where you will find the custom breakpoints very useful. Iterative visual design and coding. So when we say iterative, it includes that we first at times design for the desktop website, and then we start thinking how the design would convert to the mobile version. So it is iterative, as in you can also consider going from mobile and the desktop and then considering the breakpoints. This iterative style, the agile development style, has been in place with the developers for quite a while now. What we do there is we kind of revisit the same code and do changes in there wherever the agile style lets you do that. Now we have this style for the design, and why so? Because now the design is going to also include code. So it's a good idea for the designers to kind of get used to this iterative design style, because you want to have your creativity consistent for all those iterations that are going to be there. It's not such that you're going to do the design at one portion towards the beginning of the project and then code the design, implement the design. It's not going to be like that now. It's the iterative visual design and coding. Moving ahead, we talk about test on real devices. Though there are many online tools available for testing responsive websites, but it's still advisable to test your website on the real devices. Many a times it is observed that UI looks perfect on the simulators, but shows issues when tested on the real device. So we'll also talk about what things we should be taking care of while testing the responsive websites. So basically, we should be validating the design and functionalities across different screen sizes while taking care of the visibility, the CSS properties, and positions of elements. Think outside design. So layouts to suit the device style. Now thing is that while designing responsive websites, it's not only that aesthetics and creativity is what we should be thinking about. We also need to think about the user experience which is going to get transformed from our design when the design is viewed on different devices. So and we know that user experience of devices are different. The layout should suit the style of each device. Layout being fluid might also introduce few inconsistencies across the devices, which should be dealt keeping the UX in mind. Similarly, the content presentation might be different, as we had seen in the samples. The content might look little different on the mobile and the tablets and iPads, and it might look little more descriptive, little more expanded on the desktop version. A little bit about thinking outside the design. The third point there says forget about perfect. Now I know when we talk about RWD, all we say is making the design look perfect on each and every device. Why we have mentioned the point there is because whenever we are specifying bits in percentages, the floating point precision related to each browser for each device can be different. Like for example, 62% may not look the same on Explorer or Safari or Firefox on say the iOS device or on the desktop. I mean, this is just an example, but those fluid inconsistencies, those floating point inconsistencies are going to make your UI look little disrupted at times. But let it go. I mean, you cannot be 100% perfect. You just need to keep that in mind, because otherwise you are kind of end up doing the over coding, which later on affects the performance. Now we'll go to the next practice. So awareness of CSS constraints. Now when we know that the website is going to be responsive, which means it is going to get reflected on various devices, we might need to sacrifice few things at the design level. And keeping in mind the CSS constraints, we should design in a way that it allows as many page elements to be in pure CSS. Maybe we might want to get rid of some fancy effects, and we might want to have some simple gradients and shadows. This also allows for more flexibility when resizing the page content. And last but not the least, it reduces the loading time. So it's a very important practice to take care of. Liquid layouts and grids. Liquid layouts should be used to create adaptable page layouts. These use multi-column design grids. Fixed measurements like pixels or inches are not used in liquid layouts. Now, within the brackets we have mentioned examples here. Now, media rules are used inside CSS is like one of the way of using media queries. The display areas are defined by setting the viewports. Response.js helps resolving the IE6 issue. Lazy loading is better for performance. We should not be uploading all the page contents at the same time. Instead, we should prefer lazy loading to take care of the performance. So the gist is that only what's necessary gets loaded. This is something, again, that we have been doing for quite a while now, but we have still put there as a best practice, one of the best practices, because again, even though RWD, it is not going to help us get rid of all our problems. So techniques like lazy loading and other techniques which have been there and which have been very useful, we should continue using them. Use SVG. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. So wherever possible, we should avoid the problems of pixel-based images by using the vector alternative. SVG would help us getting a better quality image. It would be more scalable. These are like small file sizes. They are always crisp, and there are no pixels. So it is better to use SVG, as in we would have one image which can be scaled across the devices based on the device size. And there is only one drawback with SVG, but it is with no pixels, always crisp and all that, but if I decide and make all my images SVG, it is going to be very tedious job because it is difficult to create SVG images. So again, use this best practice with a pinch of salt and try to use SVGs wherever necessary, wherever very useful, but otherwise you will have to settle with JPEGs and bitmaps and other formats. Videos and data tables will need specific consideration. Now why so? Thing is that the viewport size changes, but the media size doesn't change. So there are few ways of dealing with the media. One way is that we assign 100% width to the canvas. Another approach can be that we consider the videos which are coming from the third party like YouTube. We put the embedded video absolutely positioned in the parent element while adding appropriate bottom padding to it. Regarding the data tables, it would always be good converting the data in graphs, etc. But if we are not doing so, we would take care that it should be shown properly. The tables should be shown properly. So that was all about the best practices. Moving ahead, we'll have a quick look at the major advantages of responsive web design. So as indicated here, it is like a single source and URL. It is good for SEO. I'll talk a little more about the SEO. It's more convenient for search engines to crawl, index, and organize website content when there is one single URL and the same HTML. So there is a little problem about this, that at times mobile specific keywords which are required for SEO might not be possible within a single URL. However, looking at the advantages which are shown on the screen right now, still we think it's worth it. So essentially, RWD is going to help us put the applications or make the applications work and look nice on possibly all past, current, and future devices. However, there are some things that you should keep in mind while doing this. You should use RWD only if it fits. By that, what I mean is essentially the major component of your application is the features and the content. Only if the content is going to, the design style is going to suit the content, make it RWD. For example, if you have content which is not going to look well on mobile phones, then there is no point in having a single deployment, single URL, where people are going to access your application from the mobile device just to know that they cannot play with the application or they cannot use the content because of the device limitations, the screen size limitations of the mobile device. That is going to be a no-no. RWD is going to be a no-no at that point. If at all you can make changes in the layout, then that's fine, but otherwise I would not advise you to use RWD. Similarly, the user experience is something, the overall user experience is something that you should consider while going the RWD way. Third thing is the e-commerce. What exactly gets you money? Is it your mobile application or is it your desktop application? That is something that you should start with, and then the remaining thing. If it is mobile, the desktop should follow the mobile. If it is desktop that is getting you money, the mobile should follow the desktop. So the primary device that kind of helps you get the money should be the primary device that you are thinking of when you are designing RWD. The other thing is, we discussed a little bit earlier about the mobile first strategy. So if it is kind of the e-commerce is not ruling the device of use, the progressive enhancement of mobile site can be a good idea, because you design the mobile layout and then you design the site with RWD, with a little bit of modified layout and with changed content quality, image quality and all that, and put that site up on desktop. That will be a very good idea. We'll see in a while, and maybe you have noticed so far also, that RWD is going to cost a little bit more initially. But believe me, it is going to be a good thing. It is going to have a lasting benefit, because by definition, and I think in practical also, RWD is going to help you get the applications on all the devices. All would be well only if. We all know that if you have something good, there is always a catch. So what's the catch with RWD? There are a couple of limitations. For example, so far we have been saying that single solution is the way. The single solution is going to provide you layouts for desktop and mobile. But there are cases where people don't want the mobile and desktop layout to look similar or have very small differences. There are cases where people want the mobile application to look entirely different than desktop. So in that case, going the RWD way just because you want single source and single deployment may not be advisable, because it will be a maintenance nightmare. So that is something that you should consider. Second thing is, RWD is the recent trend. So there are quite a few sites and mobile applications which are already out there. Now, if you want to go the RWD way, let me tell you that there is very little that you can reuse. Obviously, you can use the graphical assets and all, but this style, RWD coding style with HTML5 and CSS3, kind of makes the earlier UI components pretty useless, and it's a very tough decision to break something which is already working and decide to go the RWD way. And the third thing is, because it is graphical design and coding, building and maintaining is very time consuming, because earlier when the design was a different part, I mean, we used to do the design before at the beginning of the application, and it was kind of modular, where you could actually take the UI portion out separately. Now it is kind of combined, where you are putting the code itself in the HTML files and in the CSS files and all that. So building and maintaining that can be time consuming. All these limitations are going to be very essential to consider when I'm thinking as a strategy whether to go the RWD way. Now suppose I have decided to go the RWD way, still there are some limitations. For example, the media queries that we were talking about before, that is something which is there on the client side, which makes the client application a little bulky. Also, there are designs observed, there are applications observed where they kind of try to use same images starting from mobile to desktop. So what they usually do is they have an image, high density, high width image which looks good on desktop, and they scale it down so that it will look good on mobile. Yes, it does look good, but you don't need that high density, high width image to be displayed on mobile. You're kind of wasting the network resources at that particular time. You're doing the over downloading. And all this, if your site is the image intensive site, all this is going to contribute in getting the performance down of the site. Second thing is, again, this HTML5 CSS3 thing is a recent thing. There are libraries like respond.js so that you can have your RWD design look good on i6 also, but then there will be always limitations for the browsers which are not going to support HTML5 CSS3, and again those devices are going to be a no-no for you. And then there is a handling of third-party content. We kind of touched base this a little bit while we are talking about the videos. So if there is a third-party content, you don't know how it is going to look in your RWD layout. Even if you put that on iframe, care has to be taken so that it looks good. So if your website is such that, or your application is such that it is going to use a lot of third-party content, then probably you should really consider before you are going the RWD way. Now, other than the strategic limitations which we discussed earlier, some of the limitations like performance and all have some workaround, and this is what we are going to talk about in this section. That workaround is in the form of REST, responsive server-side design. What responsive server-side design will do is it will take help from server, and it will have context, it will have device specifications, and it will use all that in determining the server's response. Let me tell you how. The initial problem with the performance is such that you don't know, you are over downloading the images which are higher in size and all that. So what was done was you saved the user's context. For example, there is a user called John and he is accessing my application using an iPhone 5. You save that in the user's context. So next time when the user comes in, most probably that it is a very high chance that he is going to access the application using again iPhone 5, and now that context is saved at the server side, and server can determine what image asset can be sent to John, what markup can be sent to John. We can cache this context, we can cache the device specifications. The image handling can be done by the server or by a specific image server where it kind of scales down the images and sends them back. Now while we are doing it, again, care can be taken for following sensors also. For example, time of the day, network speed and all that. I know there are a couple of clients, couple of users for my application which are coming from a region where the network speed is very slow. Why not let my server handle that too? So as a part of responsive server-side design, I can do all this. This is a typical workflow if I'm implementing responsive server-side design. Like I said earlier, detect the device using HTTP headers before doing the first page load. When you know what is the device, you can select the appropriate context, send the device capabilities to the JavaScript for client-side detection, and you can send the markup depending on what device I have. So this kind of helps me make maximum possible good use of the network bandwidth. I'm going to save this user information and save these device specifications in cookies as well as in the server side. So next time when I'm loading the application or the website, with the help of these cookies, the user context, the device features and all that, I'm not going to stretch my network resources a lot and the performance bugs can be resolved. Now this kind of summarizes what we wanted to talk about, the best practices and the limitations and all that of the responsive web design. And here are some more examples just for your review about the responsive design. You can see that the application looks good on mobile, tablet, as well as desktop. I think, I hope we have given you enough information about the responsive web design, and now we are going to open the session for questions.
So folks, please do type in the questions in the question box, and if you cannot find that, feel free to type it in the chat box, whichever way you can. In the meantime, thank you Vibhuti and Prachi for this engaging conversation. I wish that we could do it two-sided, but I think now we can sort of think we can get the questions, and I already have some of them with me. So I'm going to start off with the first question that came in, which is, can you explain some of the frameworks that can be used for creating responsive web design?
Okay, Amit, as I mentioned in my earlier slide, that there are various frameworks available. For example, Bootstrap, Foundation 3, Groundwork, Cube, etc. I would say that Bootstrap is one of the most commonly used frameworks. The reason being it's built on responsive 12-column grid layouts and components. Whether you need a fixed grid or a responsive one, it's a matter of few changes. These frameworks also provide, like Bootstrap also provides an extensive list of components like drop-down menus, pagination, popovers, accordions, etc. They also provide base styling for various HTML elements like tables, forms, buttons, etc. So as I said earlier, we really do not need to invent the wheel again, and we should be using one of these frameworks. My preference would be Bootstrap.
Okay, that's great. And then the other question is, can you explain how to take care of testing for responsive web design? I think that's an important question because people who are into active development would find these questions important. So if you can throw some light on testing on responsive web design.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier while talking about the best practices, I gave you insights into what things we should be testing. So now talking about how the testing can be done. The testing of responsive websites can be done in many ways. For example, resizing the browser window. If you are using the browser as Firefox, then we can use the developer tools and have the responsive view open. There are various simulators and emulators which we can use. We can do the testing on actual devices, which is the most preferred one. So as I told, there are several online tools also available for testing the responsive site. Like one example that comes in my mind is Responsinator is one of such tools. So in most of these tools, we just need to mention the website URL, and the tool then shows how the site would look on various devices and the various modes. So in one go, we are able to see the various views of our website on various devices, how it is going to look.
All right. Thank you, Vibhuti, and I hope that the folks out there found it useful.
Sure.
Here is another question that came in, and it says, if any existing site is to be converted to responsive web design, what would be the possible steps involved in that?
Okay, I will take this one, Amit. Like I touched base on this topic a little bit before, the RWD it takes first a little bit of trouble from the site owner or the people who already have an existing site to make up their mind and go the RWD way, because they are going to scratch the existing UI and try to build something new. But once we have made that decision, what we need is, we need to know what is exactly the device that you are going to look at. If it is mobile or if it is desktop only, then probably you should design for that. You should also look for the content. Do you have any content do you have all the final content with you? Then probably you will be able to design the RWD better, looking at the content type, the content strategy. For example, if you are having a third-party content and all that. Once you are through with all of this, then probably you can engage your team and go for the RWD way.
All right. So, I mean, there are now questions which I'm going to lump in. One of that is, if any existing site is to be converted to responsive, you already answered that question.
Yes.
So should I consider responsive web design if I'm only looking for applications on mobile phones, and how would different languages figure in? Is that something that we can attempt to answer today? So I'll repeat that. How should we consider responsive web design if we are looking for applications on mobile phones? And if languages were to be considered, then how would we go about it?
Okay, so let's first talk about the mobile phone. If you are looking at the native application, then definitely RWD does not apply, because RWD essentially needs the browser. But if you are looking for hybrid applications, and if your target device is only the mobile, there can be a thinking that you don't need RWD because you are not going to support a lot of different screen sizes. However, I will still recommend RWD because the very early example that I gave, iPhone 5 and iPhone 4, where they suddenly changed the aspect ratio. In such cases, if you have your HTML designed the RWD way, it will always help you. And then for the languages, Vibhuti, you have...
Yeah, I would like to add another point when we talk about the dedicated mobile site, that if you are going for a dedicated mobile site, it is good that it should be optimized for the devices. We should be serving smaller images, and conditionally we should be loading the script. This will help us enhancing the performance of the site on the mobile device. Talking about the languages, I think see, when we talk of responsive nature of a website, it essentially comprises of the look and feel of the website changing on various devices, on various resolutions and screen modes. So responsive nature of a website includes mainly the look and feel and the user experience of the website. So I think different language should not be a problem at all.
Yeah, different language will anyways take care of the resource package and the language settings and all that, and it will probably work the same way it was going to work with the earlier design style.
All right. So that did take care of one of the questions that I got recently about languages, and I kind of merged the two questions. And is there any framework for REST?
Okay, responsive server-side design is something that we definitely need along with the responsive web design because of the performance issues and all that. But unfortunately, there is no framework per se which will help you do that. There are a couple of best practices which I listed earlier, but we have to do that on our own whenever the server-side part is going to come in. So RESS essentially, Amit, does not have any framework which I can use as is, at least to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. That kind of, there are some questions that I still have, but in terms of the clock that I was following, I'm sort of running out of time. So I'm going to be closing the webinar soon. So in the meantime, while I'm talking, if there is any question that pops up that we can take immediately, I'd be happy to take that. But in the meantime, I wanted to thank the audience for taking the time to join our webinar. We hope that you found it useful. I hope that you also found that people who spoke about it were knowledgeable about it. So I would request that if you have any questions as an afterthought, please feel free to write to us on hstlinfo@harbingergroup.com, or even if you visit us at the website and drop us a line, that just give us a reference and we would be able to shoot an answer right back. At the same time, thank you folks who were helpful in arranging the webinar. Prachi and Vibhuti, it was great hearing you talk about responsive web design, and I'm sure folks out there enjoyed listening to you. Thank you very much, and I'm going to keep the webinar on. I'm going to go on mute. Folks who don't have a question, feel free to leave, but do respond to us if we ask you a question later on in an email. If you found the webinar useful, we would really appreciate it, and it would help us come up with better webinar topics in the future. And feel free to write to us if you think there is any technology topic that we should take in the future. We would be happy to consider that as one of the webinars. We are a pure technology house, and we love to talk about technology and how it can be used effectively. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And folks out here in Asia, have a good night. Thanks a lot. I'm going on mute. Any questions, please feel free to type in. We are sort of on. Did we have a question?
There was a request about posting the slides on the webinar. We'll definitely think about it, and we'll let you know. At least we'll share some of the materials, some of the responses.
Oh yes, certainly. We will be sending the information out to the attendees by email. They will get that as an acknowledgement of attending the webinar. Yes, definitely, sirs and ma'ams, you would get that. Thank you very much. This is Harbinger Systems. Very, very grateful to you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.